Okay, you can hear me. Okay, good. So, as soon Gustavo will stop talking, we can start. Okay. Thank you, Gustavo. So, Excellencies, we have a minister with us. Ladies and gentlemen, it's a pleasure to be here and to moderate that event in the Americas Pavilion with our colleagues from ICA. So, let me start without further ado because time is very short and we have 1 hour, so we will try to navigate really in the best way in that event. That is titled Changing Practices and Increasing Sustainability, Inclusive Engagement for Successful Policies. So we have a lot of very interesting words here, inclusiveness, but we want to be successful. So we will here really showcase real-world examples, so not just, I would say, theoric example. So we will see what is really happening with different stakeholder engagement for the development of inclusive and effective agricultural practices, and this is the practices that we really need now to implement because the time is tick-tack, tick-tack. So 2030 is around the corner. 6 growing period, no more. For farmers, this is really something they will understand. We will also outline the complexity because it's not so simple. Why we are here today? Because to tackle that really complexity, we cannot run away from the complexity. We have really to embed that in our action. And dialogue. So I hope to see an interesting dialogue from here, the different panelists. I will present them. And then also perhaps a moment with the audience for some questions, perhaps, let's see. But I will call first ICA DDG Lloyd, so Lloyd Day, please. And I will be back on the panelists after you have the name, but I will ask you to briefly introduce yourself. It's always better the panelist introduce himself after. So, but when I will ask the first question, I will ask you then to introduce and then to answer the question. DDG Day, you want to come here or you want to stay here? You stay here. I will myself go closer to you because for engagement is better than feeling away. So please for your introductory remark of that event. Thank you so much.
Sure, well thank you. My name is Lloyd Day. I'm the Deputy Director General of ICA, the Inter-American Institute for Cooperation on Agriculture. The subject, changing practices and increasing sustainability, inclusive engagement for successful policies, is really kind of why we're here at the COP, Marcel. We've been working with farmers across the Americas and around the world to bring their voices to, first, it started with our kind of struggle with certain unilateral regulations that were imposed on our farmers by a certain part of the world. That then morphed into the Food System Summit, where, as you know, the world was talking about a transformation of food systems, but they weren't talking to farmers. They weren't talking to ministers of agriculture. So we worked across the hemisphere and around the world, bringing together farmers, farm organizations, stakeholders, as we've been talking about, to discuss what should be our guidance to the UN Food System Summit so they are reflective of what farmers need and what ministers of agriculture need. And that eventually turned into this Home of Sustainable Agriculture of the Americas. And so this is a place that has farmers present. We've had farmers for 7 straight days here talking about what they're doing to reduce their emissions and to sequester carbon, to show that agriculture is part of the solution. And so that's why we're here. So I'll stop there because I know we have lots of questions and lots of people on the panel.
Thank you so much. And indeed, this is the most important to have the farmers and agriculture as a whole voice within a convention that is mostly led by people aligned with ministries of environment, finance, foreign affairs. So it's never given that agriculture is having the right voice here. And you remember the unilateral regulation, and indeed now it's part also of an agenda that has been put forward to discuss that and how it can impact as a whole. But without further ado, I want to ask Sue McCluskey from Australia, and if you can just introduce yourself briefly before responding to the question. And the question, basically, I will ask you to present the process used in the development of the industry-led Australian agriculture sustainability framework that have been released quite recently in 2022. So it's really recent. So please, over to you.
Thank you, and my name is Sue McCluskey. I am the Special Representative for Australian Agriculture. So that's sort of like an ambassador for Australian agriculture, and it's a unique position because I'm a ministerial appointment, but I'm an industry voice. I'm actually a cattle farmer myself, so I speak very much from the heart on this topic. And for me, it is so essential to have farmers, indeed stakeholders who you're going to impact as part of the policy development process. And because I've got a policy background, I really make sure that I push that in terms of any engagement that I have, not just in Australia, but around the world. So I'll talk about our Australian Agricultural Sustainability Framework, which is our overarching framework that demonstrates Australian agriculture's commitment to sustainability. It was developed through consultation with stakeholders, and it was released in 2022, so only a couple of years ago. And what it does is articulates our commitment across 17 different principles that go across all the areas of economic, social and governance. Importantly, it speaks to the language of ESG, which is the language of the corporates, but it also aligns with the SDGs, which are, of course, the language globally. However, the pathway to developing the framework was not necessarily that easy. We have had a number of individual industry sectors that had already been thinking about sustainability, what they were doing. They were developing calculators. Some were more advanced than others. And so when we were talking about developing this overarching framework, there was a bit of pushback. It was, hang on, aren't you duplicating? We've already done this, our sector doesn't need something else. And there was also this issue of ownership. Who owns this? How does it get branded? And so we did get quite a bit of pushback to start with, and it was important to actually articulate that this was the overarching narrative on this. And for someone like me in my position, when I go into global markets, particularly our trading partners, I find I can put up the slide on our framework and they go, wow, this is great. And I can talk to it, I can talk how it meets a whole lot of different areas and outcomes. Now that we're moving towards natural capital, I can even talk about biodiversity and soils and water. But then I say it drops down to individual industry frameworks, sustainability frameworks. And that's what makes the difference to farmers. Interestingly, we have now developed a community of practice, so we're getting all of the stakeholders at the strategic level engaged, and we've now got them on board. They've seen it's not about patch protection, it's not about, who gets to be branded, it's about a collaborative approach. But it also is that very high level. I think where we've got to go to now, and perhaps we didn't do this so well in terms of communication, was build that bridge between the strategic output and the farmer. So if you were to ask the average farmer, what does the Australian Agricultural Sustainability Framework for me, they would say, I've never heard of it. And that's right for them to say that. Whereas what I do when I talk to farming groups, I'll say, let's think about, and I give myself as an example as a beef cattle farmer, underneath this overarching framework sits the beef sustainability framework. Within that framework, it tells me what are the things I can do on my farm to help reduce emissions, to help measure carbon. What are the tools and calculators I can have that actually helps with this? So that's how I talk to farmers. So I think the real key here is communication, and that the communication needs to be at different levels. You can't just give one message and think that that's going to be the right message for everyone, and we've got to build the bridge towards that.
Thanks so much for that. Yeah, you can hear me. Okay, so it's also very nice to see that we have a special envoy for agriculture and not just a special envoy for climate. So really bringing that lens we need, agriculture. And you say it's not easy to build a framework, but we should not be discouraged by that, because here we have an example of success. So at the end, you implement in a way that you have an umbrella, but then it can trickle down up to the farmer with a language they can understand. So this is something really important. No, I will turn with, on your example is quite recent, 2022. I will turn with Gustavo, that is an example that is perhaps a little bit older. I want basically to ask you to present yourself. Everyone knows Gustavo also. But also to respond to example with the ABC plan. And now I guess you are ABC plus, and perhaps waiting for, if you can anticipate ABC plus plus. So but Gustavo, please, and if you can also tell us what will happen at COP30.
Thank you, Martial. I'm Gustavo Moser. I'm the head of the Global Policy Division from Embrapa, which is a research company in Brazil that deals agriculture. We've been dealing the UNFCCC negotiation for many years, and the ABC is a spillover of that strategy, and it's very much aligned with what we are dealing here in this panel today, which is how to bring farmer to the center of the discussion. So the agriculture and climate change, they are interlinked because agriculture deals with climate every day. So this is the daily routine of farmers. Climate change is just making this a little bit harder, a little bit more long-lasting and into the future in terms of how they will bring up new strategies and how climate is modifying the way agriculture has been done in the past. So the centrality of farmer is crucial. Dealing with adaptation is crucial. Dealing with the interlinkages on how to retain the revenue of farming, food security, and how to control emissions. Those are the key pillars that we have to bring them together. And as a research company, what we do mainly is to try to create those kinds of solutions that are viable, that make sense, and that can be well communicated with farmers so that they can understand and put them together in a meaningful and useful way. Thanks.
Thank you, Gustavo. As you said, daily routine of farmer, and indeed farmers have to cope every day with a changing climate and with more and more extreme events that are also more and more frequent. And I guess we should come in Brazil because with that continuity from ABC, moving now forward to ABC plus, so it shows also the consistency that we need to have in the engagement with farmers, with communities, with group of farmers. So thanks for that. Now we will move from Brazil to Canada. So, and I will not ask the question in French. You should be able to respond in French because it's agri-food. It's so. But Sophie, I will say in American way, Becher, okay. If you can present yourself and show how agricultural, agri-food Canada are taking that sector engagement approach and to build the sustainability. So I'm quite sure you have plenty of good examples to show to us. So, and you can, for me, you can respond in French. I have no problem.
Yes, hello. So I'm Sophie Beecher from the Department of Agriculture and Agri-Food in Canada. I'm the Director General of Sustainable Development Policy. And so very much in the policy sphere. We work very closely with other branches in our department, program, science, market, engagement, etc. But, I like to say it all starts with policy in government. So I wanted to talk about the process that we've recently undertaken in the development of a sustainable agriculture strategy from the federal government. Very much envious of the successes that my colleagues have had in their respective countries. And so, we've tried to shift our approach from a very traditional government engagement model. Traditionally, governments engage through consultations. So we go out, we talk to people, we gather information, and then we sort of retreat into our government black hole and mix around ideas, and then some months later come out with a product where there hasn't necessarily been a feedback loop or almost a verification process to make sure that we understood properly what was said to us initially, whether we got the language right. Sometimes governments are blind to the use of certain words or expressions that producers will tell us don't paint them in the best of lights, and we have to be very careful about that. A formal consultation process also doesn't have the benefit of having a variety of stakeholders sit together and have an exchange between them in front of government representatives, where a lot of new ideas or sometimes even areas of consensus emerge. And so, bottom line, these are hard lessons, but we have learned them. A policy or a strategy will never function if the producers and the sector does not buy into it, and if the strategy itself is not alive, so is not implemented. We've all witnessed these sort of stale web pages that nobody ever looks at, and after a certain number of years, they disappear, and all of the work is for naught. So we're really trying to do it differently this time around. In the development of the Sustainable Ag Strategy, which has not seen the light of day yet. We're hoping that it will, and the government is committed to seeing it through. However, I'm here to talk about the process. What we did is we constituted an advisory committee of 23 key stakeholders, mainly producer associations, commodity associations, and some environmental and climate change nonprofits. And we asked them for a year. We've extended this, so it's now been 2 years of their time. And so we meet with them. The first year was every 2 weeks, so it was intense. The second year was once a month, where we developed goals and objectives for the strategy, and every time we reached a new milestone in the work, we would put it to them. We would actually give them an embargoed copy. They could even take some of the ideas back to their memberships to sort of present and get the feedback of their members, and sort of bring those back to the table with the Chatham House Rules system. And so we've done that for 2 years, to the point now where this group of stakeholders has now seen 2 versions of the draft of the strategy. Government doesn't do that normally. They don't table drafts for producer associations to look at. And we've gotten a lot of harsh criticisms. It's been trying for us, to sit there and be told, no, we did not hit the mark here, and we need to do it better here. But I think we've come to the almost the end of the process, where there's a general consensus that even if some of the associations cannot necessarily endorse the strategy, they can live generally with where we've landed. And the exciting part is that they've shared with us that they wish to continue this process for the implementation phase, and that's where the real work will get done.
Okay, thanks so much. You started with policy, and we are a UN organization working with policy, supporting policy, so I fully agree with you. Policy is key, but we need also other element, I guess, that will bring this in the discussion. And you mentioned really consultation, but inclusive consultation, oh my God, every 2 weeks, it's not just a one-shot, basically where you just tick the box. It was not a tick the box exercise, it was a real process, to engage people, and I would say building trust. And with the farmers, with the organization, so really farmer-centric. So congratulations for that, and I hope they will really feel that they are part of that strategy, and this is basically what we need, because farmers and organization, and basically this is what they need to feel. They need to have a document that resonates. And the example we had also from Australia is the same, and from Brazil I know the process was. It's really that. If you want to have a document that is implemented on the ground, you need to have the ownership. But the ownership, not only the government, the ownership of the farmer that will say, yeah, I contributed to that document, my voice is here. So thanks for that. Now I guess we will move for the second part. I have different ways to proceed. Either you can ask questions to each other if you want to have more information, or either I have here some questions that I myself am ready to ask to you. And we can also turn back a little bit to the audience if we have some question. And I don't want to have declaration, statement. I want to have question. So if you start with a declaration or statement, sorry, I will cut you. I will ask you for your card, and then after you can send me your statement. But I want a real question. And it's really open to all levels, from ministers to farmer, if we have a farmer in the room. So, do you have already a question for another panelist? If not, think about. And then I revert back to you. But perhaps in the audience, do we have someone? Oh, we have already. You stand ready. So, thanks so much.
So thank you, Marcel. First of all, I enjoyed your making fun of the American accent for a French name, and usually we do it the opposite way, but that was fun to see it in the opposite direction. So farmers and farm groups and farm organizations are getting a lot more involved in trying to fashion policy related to sustainability, related to climate change. We have, the fear, we're experiencing right now a couple elements. That one was the EU Farm to Fork initiative, which died, but it didn't die within the halls of the European Commission. And now we have the EU deforestation regulation, which was put on hold this last week, thanks to the leadership of Minister Matos from Uruguay and the 34 member states of ICA. We have submitted, some real, I'd say, direct language to the European Commission saying they ought to have a dialogue with us. They ought to put it within the WTO. We need to think as a world how we're going to deal with sustainability policies, sustainability in trade, and the fact that not one size fits all. I mean, we represent a lot of member states in the tropics. I'm sure the growing conditions in Australia are different than Canada, are different than Brazil. And so we need to make sure that that we try to have a global consensus on what we can and can't do, what tools we can and cannot use. I'd like to ask, I've been very involved with some of the Canadian policy initiatives that are happening through CAPI and other things, but I was wondering what's going on in both, you could all speak, what's going on in Australia on this issue, Canada and Brazil, if that's okay.
Excellent question. So we will start and go in that direction. So please, Sue.
Thank you. So I'll talk on a couple of points there, particularly around that one size doesn't fit all, because it's one thing that Australia very much says, and we've been quite concerned about what the EU did under their farm to fork approach, the very prescriptive and ideological approach to developing global rules and regulations that are just not fit for purpose for different economies, different production systems, different soils, different sizes of business. And so we've very much taken a role globally in pushing back on that. What we're trying to do in Australia at the moment is, and we're developing under our net zero climate challenges plan, there are 6 sectoral plans, and one of them is the agriculture and land sector plan. And as someone who's worked in best practice policy, one of the key principles of that is co-design. And so it was great, Sophie, to hear about what you're doing in Canada around that. But sometimes governments can actually, say they're doing co-design and not really engage in it. I have to say that this process that we're seeing in Australia at the moment is very much about co-design. It's about getting the stakeholders in the room and having government just present a couple of options and thinking and saying, how do you think this would work? What would happen if we were to try and put this scenario to you? And it's very much about that testing and what we call sandboxing. And that's really, really important. But you've also got to be aware that it doesn't matter how much effort you put into it, you're never going to get it perfect. So let's not pretend that. And you've got to be prepared to change and respond. I think one of the biggest challenges, and I say this as a farmer myself, is getting the absolute end users into the room. Farmers in Australia, like many farmers around the country, we're time poor. Most of us are small family farmers. We don't have the understanding to be able to contribute. And so we're represented by our peak bodies. Sometimes there can be a distance between what a farmer does on the ground and what a peak body can represent. And I think that's one of the key challenges, and particularly for your small family farmers. How do you get their voice, but recognise you can't do the right thing by everyone? So what's that balance?
Thanks so much. Without further ado,
Thank you. That's a tricky question there, Mr. Day. So I will say for environmental and climate change policies set by other countries in the world that have a sort of a indirect or direct impact on access to markets for Canadian farmers and trade. At the origin of those policies, there may have been a good intention, but they are not necessarily designed, drafted, and applied in a way that suits all climates and contexts, geographies, crops, commodities, etc. And what our fear is in Canada is that it makes our producers jump through hoops to sort of achieve an objective that does not necessarily help environmental situations in our own country, and sort of takes a lot of resources away from where we should be putting the efforts to improve things from a climate change mitigation, adaptation, biodiversity standpoint for Canada and for the rest of the world. And that's always a danger with a one-size-fits-all approach. It's not appropriate for all regions of the world. In Canada, we have our own challenge with that. As you all well know, we have 10 provinces, 3 territories. We have very Nordic climate at the top. We've got oceanside provinces that have very different soil conditions. And for example, the prairies in Ontario and Quebec, some areas are extremely dry, other areas are extremely wet. And so we have our own challenges in Canada to sort of address issues in a way that they can be implemented in a very localized, regional manner. And so generally we try to work with provincial and territorial governments as well as organizations that are locally based. We recognize that they are the best placed to dispense program dollars and assess the realities on the ground and work with the producers with which they're most familiar with. And that gets us the closest to the results that we expect.
Well, thanks. For our perspective, I think, I mean, in the same vibe of the previous countries, we think this is a very tricky and difficult situation that creates a little bit more, I mean, noise and disinformation than really focus the attention from farmers and farmers' organization from what's really important, really take into consideration national conditions and the necessity to really take into consideration adaptation, regional and local circumstances. So for us, it's really important to be very aware of data generation, understanding where gaps in data is, and to have a very clear, as much as possible, communication with farmers and farmers' organization based on substantial information, data that can really demonstrate what is happening on the ground. This is number one. Based on that, we can move forward and be more prescriptive and more objective in terms of how do we communicate and create a national strategy and organize with our neighbors and go for expand this kind of dialogue beyond our neighborhood to other countries that have similar climate conditions. And through that, we think there is a very robust approach to demonstrate for some of those countries that there's no one size fits all. We have to take into consideration agriculture based on the idea that it is diverse. It is really something that touches the livelihood of people, but at the very last, I mean, most overarching aspect, it deals with food security. So if you're not taking food security on the bottom, on the center of this discussion, then for our sake of perspective, and I can say that very clear because I'm a researcher and we work in a research organization, this is wrong. This is wrong and will create much more problems than solutions for the world. This is my take on that. Thanks.
So what I want to say to all of you, thank you. Thanks for the question, very interesting question, and that was not in my list of the question, but you provide some element of answer that basically, I like the way both of you articulate different level of answer, and basically we had a unilateral decision from an economic group of countries that created some complexity when landing in a global world. And you remind that different points. So co-design, clearly it has not been co-design. It's a group that designed something for himself. And you said, perhaps with a good intention, I can tell you, yeah, the intention, I guess, originally was to respond to the farmer in Europe that unhappy that were in the street and was calling their own government to be protected. But the response was probably not the best one that it could be. Gustavo added on that basically why? Because agriculture is not a sector as the other. It's food security. It's our food. It's also people that are affected by the climate change. So basically we cannot also treat agriculture as the other sector is not just normal trade. It's a specific sector that can be really looked carefully under any different, under UNFCCC, under WTO, under the CBD or the UNCCD, on other fora. So this is really what we need, and this is basically the topic here, to how to be inclusive, but inclusive not only at national level, but in international level. So I hope that agriculture will remain linked with the UNFCCC, and that we will navigate and find a way that we respect that aspect, that what we need first, and you said food security. 800 million of people still suffering from hunger, and this is the first priority, and then we can really take this into the equation as an entry point. So thanks for you to elaborate on that. Turning to the audience is really quiet. I cannot see, no question, I'm kidding. I see two questions. So be brief. I will take the two questions. And if you can just present yourself in 10 seconds and say to whom the question is addressed. So please, I'm moving to you. I can do that. Okay.
I have a 3-minute statement to give. If you
Done. Next one, please.
Good afternoon, everyone. Sid Mehta here from Canada. I had a question just on the title, and then question tied to the title, increasing the sustainability of agriculture, the inclusive engagement for successful policies. To all the three government representatives, the question of youth. And you all spoke a lot about farmer organizations, but those farmer organizations represent farmers who are struggling to transfer the intergenerational transfer that needs to happen in the next 10 years. And so how has that youth engagement been? What has the experience been? And if it has been lacking, what can be done to increase it from a youth perspective? Thank you.
Okay, thanks so much. So I will go back to you on the youth perspective, and perhaps all groups, women also, because 2026 will be the year of the woman farmer. So, over to you.
Thank you so much. So my name is Edward Shidombe from Malawi. I'm a Gripunyo as well as a youth advocate. My question is how best can we really make this the consultations to be inclusive enough, and especially looking at the fact of engaging the non-formal players, bringing them on board. We have some of the farmers who are not part of the associations, yet they can have new and brilliant ideas on how maybe we can address the issues to do with the agriculture. So how do we make it, the consultation itself, to be inclusive, bringing those from formal and informal sectors? Thank you.
Okay. So a little bit more complex question from informal, formal sector that might not apply to all countries. So perhaps I will start from Gustavo this time and then go down the line.
If you allow your mic.
I will not be able to cut you.
But anyway, thank you. Well, very quickly, those are very robust and relevant questions. And what we are dealing here, the way we see Brazil, is a very particular moment in time where transformation is happening. Transformation is happening on technology. Transformation is happening on the way we can access data. Transformation is accessing on how agriculture uses this data to make good decisions. And this transformation it's really something that is impacting and creating a little bit of opportunities and confusions with farmers' organizations. So number one for us, the way we tackle that is trust. Farmers have to trust us as scientists and as research organizations, as governments, as spokespersons that really talks with them. The message has to be really clear, really objective, and if possible, we should be in Brazil what we are doing for really complex stuff, which is really hard to define indicators we really properly, because we are dealing with multiple, complexity. Create examples, go to the ground. We build ourselves with partners, farming level partnership with some organizations, and we put the technology to be field tested, and we wait for the right moment for that test to become public. And when is that? Probably when some of the particularities of climate change that really stresses the environment are there. So when we are in a very, very drought situation, just an example, when many farmers are struggling and our technology is really showing the benefits, then we bring them there and say, look what's happening here. Look at this fence. Look at this side of the fence where traditional agriculture is being done, and in this side of the fence where new technology is there. We can teach you to do this, and you're going to be much more safer dealing with climate change, adapt to the future. Thanks.
Thank you, Gustavo. Perhaps I will revert to you on the youth aspect. Okay. Exactly, the youth aspect. Because Embrapa on university, he can be connected also, so please.
Yes, those are two very challenging questions, actually, and so I would thank the two gentlemen for the reminder to be mindful of the youth and the less traditionally represented members of the sector. So the Department of Agriculture in Canada does have a youth council, and we do go through them quite a bit. And so in the development of the Sustainable Ag Strategy, we did go and consult with the youth council on a number of occasions. However, we have to be careful that we don't engage youth periodically and just amongst themselves. I think what I would really like to see is an instance of consultation where we have both the youth and the older generations around the table, because then you can really have an exchange of ideas. And I mean, youth have a tendency to be still very full of ambition, and sometimes the older generation will tell them there are parameters, there will be challenges. And so I think that kind of a dialogue would probably have some good ideas emerge. We do acknowledge that the transfer of operations or property is going to be a challenge in Canada. Our biggest problem is that the cost of land is skyrocketing. This is not necessarily due to anything in our control. We have a lot of land speculation going on, people using land as investment as opposed to soil to grow food. We've got an urbanization and housing issue that has an impact that pushes agriculture further and further off. So that is something that we need to tackle. This is not a federal jurisdiction, it is a provincial jurisdiction. We need to work together to address that and not let that slip through the cracks. But that is a very complex problem. For the less, the less traditional stakeholders, I think that the biggest message that I have to remind myself of is when they do reach out to us to take the time, right, out of our busy schedules, and meet with them. Utilize our resources on the ground. We have a lot of regional offices to go and meet with them and sort of witness what they're doing and what the benefits are and what they need. And then I will end with a topic that was not raised, but in the same spirit of things. We have numerous Indigenous governments and communities who are engaging in agriculture of all types. We have one representative on the SAS Advisory Committee that I was talking about, the Manitoba Métis Federation, because they are heavily into farming. However, it is very, very challenging for us to go across Canada and meet with 3,000 different Indigenous communities. And so we have to find a better way to do that. They are almost over-solicited right now by the federal government because everybody wants to consult them on everything, right? It's in the process of reconciliation in Canada right now. And you know, they don't have the time anymore to meet with everyone. So we need to find a better way to get that diversity of views to the table without overburdening the Indigenous communities who need to do the farming itself. So,
thanks so much, and you can pass the mic. Yeah. I like that you bring a new aspect on the intergenerational aspect, so not only bringing youth, but an exchange in both sense. And also, opening to other communities that are specific to your country and with the numerous communities that you have. So thanks for that. And I know it's also something that in your country is also important.
So thank you. And look, like many countries in Australia, our farmers are ageing. The average age of our farmers is probably the early 60s. And we are trying to find ways to bring farmers back on the farm. But, you know, the reality is it's hard, long, dirty work. What we're finding, though, is, and particularly through our farming groups, is they're really trying to engage with young farmers and have young groups led by young people, which I think is really important. You've probably heard, many of you, of the Nuffield Scholarship System, and certainly our Nuffield scholars. We're trying to engage them more, involve them in more panels, involve them. Whenever I'm in country, I invite them to meetings and make sure that they can be seen and heard. The thing I've said for a long time is, how do we make agriculture sexy? And the one way I think we're going to be able to make it sexy for young people is ag tech, AI, because that's the way for innovation. And so I think we're on the cusp of innovation through AI and ag tech, and the way technology is advancing, for it to be really attractive to young people. I think we've still got a bit of a farmer not letting go, but with things moving so fast, a farmer's going to have to be able to have a grasp of technology, because that's going to be the game changer for a lot of them. And I think the other real key, unlock key, is climate change. Young people are highly engaged around climate change. So being able to understand how agriculture can be the solution to the challenges that we have in so many different areas around climate change, I think will be really important. Just briefly on how do you engage with the informal, and we have the same, you know, I guess, challenges in Australia about how do you engage with Indigenous communities, and, you know, you want to go to them. You don't want to expect them to come to you. And once again, we're a country that's a continent, vast landscape, and so that is a challenge. But it's really important that we do engage with all of those different groups. I think the thing that we've got to remember is when policies, regulations, frameworks are put in place, that's not the end of it. That's actually the start of the consultation, because it's only when you start to implement that you actually see, does it work, what needs to be changed, what needs to be tweaks. So making sure there's avenues that any of the users can come back and say, look, this doesn't quite work for me. Take that on board, and if you don't change something, actually put out why. So have feedback back to people. And just finally, I think the other thing for all of those areas, and you did want me to talk about the role of women, and we're certainly encouraging more and more women. Whether it's women or youth or any other group that we're looking at, it is they want to see someone that looks like them up there. And sometimes in my role, I forget this, but I can go to countries and I can be speaking where there are young women in the audience and they say, it's great to see a woman in this role. So I think the more we can actually get young people, women, Indigenous people and others into leadership roles where they're seen will be more important.
Thanks so much. And I will turn to you, your question in another way. As ICA, do you have a program or a strategy to tackle that? I'm quite sure you have a specific instrument to deal with that dimension, and also the gender aspect.
Thank you. We do. We have a program and projects going on in all the elements that were discussed: youth, women, and Indigenous. And the Indigenous is more on the side of rural development that happens across the Americas, from the Caribbeans to the Andes to Central America to Mexico, etc. And so we've created a program called the Soul of Rurality. In Spanish, it sounds easier, La Alma de la Ruralidad, in which we brought together farmer leaders from around the hemisphere, and many of them are Indigenous, many of them are women, to talk about their shared experiences, to have that input into what we discuss with ministers of agriculture so that they have a voice. A second area is youth. We have a program for youth and gender. On the youth side, we have two main programs within our headquarters, which is the Center for Interpretation of the Future of Agriculture, the Tomorrow of Agriculture, and a Fab Lab. In both of those, we're using technology, just like you mentioned, Sue, technology to attract the youth to what is cool, what is sexy, so that they think of all the IT, the AI, the digital agriculture, the robotics, the satellites, and so they get interested in agriculture. And I have a good story about that, where I like to, when the kids come walking through the campus, I like to tell them, step outside of my office and tell them to be quiet. What's all this noise? What's all this racket? What are you doing? And then I ask them where they're from. And some of these kids were once from Santo Tomás de Santo Domingo de Heredia, where I live, and actually their school is right across from my gym. And so I was talking to these kids. They went home. I go to my gym the next day, and somebody says, "You're the guy at ICA." My kid went to visit, and he was turned on by agriculture, and he wants to be a farmer. He wants to be a technician in agriculture. And so we're trying to get kids at an early age. We have robotics competitions that are national and international. We have Minecraft competitions, which I can't watch because it makes me dizzy, but kids love it. We have a fab lab where we're taking very easy, common elements, turning it into weather detectors, sensors, teaching women how to fly drones. And then on the gender side, we have a lot of work on gender. We have a lot of women leadership conferences. We have from ministers of agriculture, female ministers, all the way down to young women leaders in their communities, much like the Soul of Virality, but bringing women together, women leaders in their communities from across the Americas to learn from each other. And I recently participated in a conference with them, and it was so wonderful to be a part of that, because it's to see a program in action that really had an impact on women, and humble women, not rich, elegant women that might be in the halls here of the COP, but people that were actually struggling to provide for their families. And they had, sorry, I mean, you guys are elegant, fancy people here. It's true, let's face it. But these people were not, they were struggling every day to provide for themselves and their family. And they found such a kinship among their relationship with each other. They formed this esprit de corps of young women, entrepreneurs, farmers, and it's a really interesting thing to watch. And so those are just 3 elements. I'm sure I forgot many more that they could tell me about. But we do have a woman leader in Washington, representative, that we're going to call the enforcer, because she's going next door to keep these guys quiet. We always seem to be next to the noisy booth in these COPs, but I'll stop there.
No, but it's interesting. So it's nice to see that your organization that deals with all the America is well equipped and really considering all the different aspects. But on the question of the gentleman, perhaps I would add, it's not only some time of IT, it depends on some context, because in some context IT is difficult, but there is commonalities. We have to transform this into something that is attractive and not have barriers like the cost of the land, for instance, because if we want to transmit and to have people having access to the farm, they need first to see some interest, because they will not go just to, because there is a land, what I'm to do, nothing, so I will go there. No, they want to have revenue from that. They want to have access to market. So this is also those aspects that we need to tackle, and I know you're also working on that, all of you. So it's basically a very complex issue, and perhaps a commonalities that we all have here in that room, that for long there were too many simplification, trying to silo, trying to look at just one lens, and now we have really a recognition that that sector is complex, a lot of different stakeholders, indigenous people, women, other marginalized groups, we have plenty. But basically, we need to be inclusive and to embrace complexity. And to embrace complexity and to build trust, this is what we have here in the title. It's really inclusive engagement, because it's not just deciding for the other that basically we will bring the solution. We have to design, and you were mentioning co-design. This is what we really need to co-design. Co-design at the local level, or the regional level, and also between government and between different economic groups eventually. I will take just one. The gentleman, I guess, was first. Oh, woman is you. I'm sorry. So I will skip you for that time. You can send a complaint.
Well, good morning. My name is Juliana. I work for a Brazilian think tank. We'll go back, same as the colleague, to the name of the panel, which is Changing Practices and Increasing Sustainability. I want to hear a little bit more about technical assistance and rural extension, because to change practices and increase sustainability, this is kind of a real important aspect, but at least in several parts of the world, public funds towards technical assistance, rural extensions are always going down and not going up. And considering the short amount of time we have to change those practices towards sustainability, I would like to hear how you are connecting and dealing with this this matched narrative. Thank you.
Okay, so technical assistance for farmers, they are ready to change, but who will they risk and who will support them if there is an issue and a new technology, a new approach that they might not fully understand? Or so you are in the best place for that.
Oh, on our side, we totally concur with the great challenge that is technical assistance, and that is paramount. If we want to make change to happen, we have to make the information reach people where they are, and we have to work very hard so that people, when they receive that information, they see it as a meaningful, useful, and very robust information. As farmers, the worst thing that could happen for a farmer is they receive some information, some indication from a government to do something, and then 2 or 3 years later, that thing stopped working, that program doesn't work anymore, and then they might have entered into a rabbit hole. So from our side, we are doing science and research. So what we want to communicate very clearly is the aspects that are related to the technology that is on the ground. How to measure it? Can they measure it with a cell phone? Cell phones today are very robust and important tools. Brazil is working very hard to make the cell phone connections to be spread all over to the agricultural field. When that technology is fully implemented, we have a very robust two-way communication tool with farmers. So using applications that we are developing in Embrapa and with other colleagues from Brazil science divisions, we can communicate with them, have technologies that they can, for example, take a picture of a leaf from a plant, and we'll identify what kind of a disease is there, using other kinds of technology as well, satellite information, etc., etc., etc. So this is a very robust way for us to skip a little bit the deficit of resources that are always there for us to expand, men's on the ground. But this has to be done in a way that we can complement strategies.
Thanks so much. On 1 minute, if you can keep, because we are running out of time.
Sorry.
No worries. But you bring an excellent point. So we need technical assistance, but we need also to make full use of all the technology we can to have that be not only one direction, but two directions, also informing the people that are on the back that can support of what is happening on the ground. So thanks for bringing that.
So in our consultations, there are generally two areas where all producers and associations agree. We need data and we need extension. In other areas, we have different opinions, different levels of agreement. A government must always ask itself what its role is, right, in something. Am I the best entity to provide an extension service? And so I think we've been doing a lot of work in the department on figuring out who producers listen to. And we've discovered that there's a variation across our country. We actually have an analyst in our team who is a behavioral fellow. So he really only focuses on ways to change behavior. And he's recently gone across Canada to a variety of farm shows and randomly interviewed producers. And they don't all agree on who has the most influence on their decision making. Some of them tell them, "Oh, it's my input provider. I trust the guy." Or others will say, "Well, my neighbor, he always knows what he's doing, so if he does it, I'll do it." And so I think as a government, our role is to not judge how extension is best delivered. It is not to be the voice of extension, because we often don't have the credibility anymore with producers. It is to provide the resources to the regional associations, the provincial associations, the provincial governments to conduct the extension programs that are best suited to their reality on the ground.
Thank you for adding that dimension of behavioral science, because it's really important. You can send someone that basically, if not listening or not credible for that other person, we will fail also. So this is really important. So what we will bring in the discussion?
Thank you. Well, I'll probably pick up on some of the comments that Sophie made, but just in the Australian context, we have our rural research and development corporations that actually deliver the adoption on the ground. And it's critical, because if you don't get the adoption, there's not, R&D is just going to sit on the shelf. We actually find that farmers do say they look over the fence. And so one of the ways is really to be able to get those early adopters and get them to be part of the training and the capacity building. So you're not getting a government person or a scientist or a researcher that's telling farmers how to adopt. You're actually getting another farmer that they can then use their live examples from their farm to say, this is what I do on the farm. And it's really important that it's locally led, because place-based solutions are what are really important. So getting the local farmer to talk about it, not someone who's from the other side of the country.
Please, on our next panelist, to conclude that round of addition.
Thank you, Marshall. Your colleague behind you here from Brazil ran our essentially virtual campus, where we try to put extension through online technical capacity training. And tells me we reach 50,000, 100,000, 200,000 eyes that get trained virtually. Now, the big problem in that is connectivity also, because with a variety of people on using this tool in order to get to farmers. But that has to be simple, it has to be specific, and it has to fit their needs. There's a variety of things we're doing on that. We're working with lots of different organizations, but we see this as the future to get information out to farmers in order to have that kind of technical capacity development. And we're doing it from a headquarters, not just in the Americas, but the whole world has access to this training once it's up online, and of course we're free.
Okay.
Fast enough? Fast enough?
That's enough. Yeah. Thanks so much. Now, I really want to thank all the panelists. I guess they deserve an applause, so please join me, because we will conclude here. I will not have words of conclusion. We don't need. So thanks so much. And thanks to all of you. And Desculpe qualquer coisa, we said in Portuguese. Sorry for everything that I've not done perfectly.